comic book fans are known to be a very obsessed and devoted fan base. And although that is true, I think we also tend to burn out a lot, just like when it comes to any other hobby or career or interest. Whether it's due to the oversaturation of superhero comics in the market or the seemingly waning quality of their cinematic counterparts, there are times when superheroes don't feel very special anymore. At least, not as special as when we first fell in love with them as kids. But there are a few superhero comic books that never fail to amaze me, that bring me back to a state of awe and wonder, as if I'm seeing them again for the very first time. Today, we talk about one of those books, a comic that's regarded as one of the greatest the medium has to offer. One that so perfectly captures the magic of the superhero world. Written by Kurt Busiek with art by Alex Ross, the Marvel's miniseries, published in 1994, remains to be one of my favorite comics of all time. It's one that I've gone back to multiple times over the years, and each time I read it, I experience the same level of awe, terror, and wonder all over again. It's a book that makes me proud to be a superhero fan, and reminds me of why I love this genre so much in the first place. It's a comic that is a tribute to the early days of superheroes in the Marvel Universe. We witness and relive monumental moments in Marvel history, like the unveiling of the first Human Torch, created by the controversial Dr. Phineas Horton, and the death of Gwen Stacy. But the thing is, if all this comic does is tread old ground, what makes it so powerful? What sets this retelling apart from the rest? The thing that gives the story its power comes from the protagonist not possessing any at all. What makes this comic special is that the main character isn't. We follow all these events through the eyes of a camera. The comic book doesn't star a superhero. It stars what most would regard to be a mundane man, a photographer by the name of Phil Sheldon. But it's this lens of powerlessness that gives the book its power. The whole series basically aims to answer one question: what is the civilian experience in the superhero world? And the answer is a complex one. Alex Ross's art paints superheroes in a glorious light. Every shot of a superhero in this comic sees them above the onlookers, up in the sky, and the amount of detail and care Alex gives these Marvels is astounding. You see them in bright and colorful costumes, and you can't help but be absorbed in the action, lost in the majesty and magnificence of it all. One thing I love about Alex Ross's art in this book is that he illustrates superheroes realistically, while also embracing the brightness and color that superhero costumes have. When it comes to most comic book adaptations attempting to be realistic, they usually dull the colors of the costumes, choosing something more tactical to fit the real world, which makes sense. But Alex Ross doesn't have his realistically drawn heroes wear realistic suits. In Marvel's, he embraces the comic bookiness of it all, and because of that, there's an otherworldly feel to the heroes here, a vibrant glow to them that visually sets them apart from the browns and grays of the average onlookers. Marvel's really celebrates superheroes in a way I genuinely admire. It doesn't just talk about them in a deep and interesting way, but gives the art space and room to shine. And my goodness, does it shine bright. There are not many instances of superheroes looking more epic than they do here. But for the civilians in the book, it's a much more complicated story. It must have seemed like a glorious aerial ballet, dangerous, beautiful, and thrilling. And maybe it was. But not for us. What we saw was carnage and destruction and confusion. and frightened people who felt safe a minute or two ago, trying to get out of the way, but not sure which way to run. To civilians, these powerful beings with unimaginable strength aren't really wonderful and beautiful. They're mostly terrifying. Superheroes and supervillains render the common man vulnerable and weak. It's not like there hadn't been mystery men before. The Angel, the Phantom Eagle, even as far back as the Rawhide Kid. But this was different. These new creatures, they were more than human. And with Doris and her mother all a Twitter over wedding plans, how was I supposed to be a husband? Maybe a father? In a world where any moment a monster could come crashing through your wall. You know what's funny though? Our main character, Phil Sheldon, is a photographer/journalist. He has to rush toward the action every time and risk his life in an attempt to capture it. But he doesn't really complain about the job. In fact, he's engrossed and captivated by the wonder and terror of it all. And it's from this vulnerable angle that we see how superheroes really are. Watching Phil snap photos of heroes in perfect poses, in joyful awe of what he's witnessing, is simply delightful. But delight only tells half of the story. Living in a superhero world also comes with its fears and horrors. And I'm not just talking about the superpowered beings being terrifying, but how people's fear of them brings out the worst in humanity. In issue 2, mutants get introduced to the world, and people are terrified. They're the next step in human evolution, Homo sapiens superior. And because of that, people are scared that they're going to be replaced. When the X-Men and team of mutants appear, we see them through the civilian perspective, scary and menacing, with the page drowning in bright red. The civilians throw debris at the mutants, even our main character does. But in reality, the X-Men were just trying to help. Spoilers, by the way, but later on in the book, Phil finds out that his 2 daughters have been taking care of a mutant child in the basement of their house. He realizes that everything people thought the mutants were was false. In reality, most mutants are just as vulnerable and afraid as humans are. This book isn't afraid to show the dark side of the superhero world. Civilians create havoc and riot on the streets in search of mutants. And when the Fantastic Four saves the world from Galactus, people just make conspiracy theories about them. Phil Sheldon goes through so much mixed emotions in these 4 comic book issues. And in the end, after feeling overwhelmed at everything, he chooses to retire. It's an abrupt ending to a roller coaster of a life in the city, but it's a retirement that's well deserved. If I had to give some sort of epic and pretentious conclusion to this video essay, it would be that Marvels by Kurt Busiek and Alex Ross puts the super back into the superhero. Every action and event, whether joyous or tragic, has a real sense of weight to it. When superheroes appear, it actually feels grand and exciting. And when terror strikes, we feel the darkness completely consume the page. In many ways, Marvels captures what it feels to be alive. A mixture of horror and wonder, of appreciation and bitterness, of excitement for the future, but the fear of what it may bring. And in the midst of it all, we find solace in those closest to us. Marvels shows what it means to be human, to be vulnerable and powerless in a world we can't control, but also the joy, wonder, meaning, and purpose that weakness can bring. And if that isn't art, I don't know what is. My name is Joshua C., and I will see you in the next one.